10 years of silent servitude can break a spirit, but for Nora, it only masked a dormant inferno. Whispers in the Black Ridge pack painted her as the weakest Omega. Nobody knew the terrifying truth running through her veins, waiting for one fateful eclipse to tear their hierarchy to shreds. Silence was the currency Nora Hastings used to buy her survival. For exactly 3,650 days, she had kept her head bowed, her eyes fixed on the gleaming hardwood floors of the Norton estate, and her mouth firmly shut. The grand mansion, nestled deep within the rain-drenched forests of Oregon, was a fortress of wealth and ancient werewolf tradition, funded entirely by the pack's human front, Black Ridge Timber Holdings. To the human world, it was a booming logging empire. To the werewolves of the Pacific Northwest, it was the seat of Silas Norton, an alpha whose cruelty was only matched by his immense fortune. And in Silas's world, Nora was nothing more than dirt under his expensive leather shoes. She was 22 years old, though her weary, calloused hands looked much older. 10 years prior, her parents, Arthur and Madeline Hastings, had been killed in an unexplained border skirmish. With no living relatives to claim her, pack law dictated that Nora become a ward of the Alpha. In reality, it meant indentured servitude. Because her wolf had never presented itself, and because she naturally shrank away from conflict, the pack physician, Dr. Harrison Gable, had officially classified her as a defective Omega. "She has no inner wolf," Dr. Gable had told a smirking Silas a decade ago, writing on his clinical clipboard. "Her biology is stagnant. She is submissive to her core. Put her in the kitchens. That is the only place she will be of any use." So into the kitchens she went. Under the heavy hand of Mrs. Beatrice Higgins, the head cook, Nora learned to scrub commercial-grade bleach into the tile grout until her knuckles bled. She learned to polish the antique silver until she could see her own exhausted reflection in the spoons. Most importantly, she learned to be invisible, but Dr. Gable was wrong. Nora wasn't stagnant. She was simply suppressing a wildfire. As she knelt in the grand hallway, vigorously buffing the oak floorboards in preparation for the evening's equinox summit, a familiar, agonizing heat flared in her chest. Nora squeezed her eyes shut, dropping the rag as a phantom set of claws scraped against the inside of her ribcage. It wasn't the weak, whimpering spirit of an Omega trying to surface. It was a dense, suffocating pressure that made her blood boil at 105 degrees. It was a beast rattling its cage, enraged and violently powerful. For years, she had suffered these internal earthquakes, dismissing them as the phantom pains of a broken girl. She had learned to swallow the fire, pushing the beast back down into the dark abyss of her soul. "Did I tell you to stop working, Mutt?" The sharp, aristocratic voice sliced through the quiet hallway. Nora opened her eyes, immediately lowering her chin. A pair of crimson-soled Christian Louboutin heels stepped into her line of sight. Genevieve Sterling. Genevieve was Silas's chosen mate, the future Luna of the Black Ridge pack, and a woman who wore her arrogance like a diamond necklace. She was the daughter of a wealthy East Coast alpha and treated the West Coast pack members like uncultured peasants. She especially loathed Nora. "I apologize, Miss Sterling," Nora murmured, her voice carefully devoid of emotion. She picked up her polishing rag. "I felt a momentary cramp. I am finishing the hallway now." "You are finishing it now because the Silver Pines delegation arrives in exactly 3 hours," Genevieve sneered, leaning down so her overwhelming scent of heavy jasmine and ozone flooded Nora's senses. "Silas is signing the new territorial treaty tonight. Alpha Blackwood is not going to walk into my home and see a pathetic, unwashed Omega loitering in the corridors. Do you understand me? You are a stain on this estate, Nora. If I had my way, you would have been banished to the rogue territories the day you turned 18. "Yes, Miss Sterling," Nora repeated, scrubbing harder at the floorboards to hide the sudden violent tremor in her hands. The heat in her chest flared again, hotter this time. Her vision blurred at the edges, tinting the polished oak with a faint shade of red. "Down," she ordered the thing inside her. "Stay down. We can't survive out there," Genevieve scoffed, intentionally kicking over the bucket of soapy water. The dirty liquid washed over the freshly polished wood, soaking into the knees of Nora's faded servant uniform. "Do it again! And if it isn't perfect, I'll have Silas lock you in the root cellar for the rest of the week." As Genevieve's heels clicked away down the corridor, Nora sat back on her heels, staring at the spreading puddle of water. A low, guttural vibration started in her throat. It wasn't a whimper. It was a growl. She clamped a wet, soapy hand over her mouth, terrified of the sound. Omegas didn't growl. Omegas didn't feel an overwhelming urge to rip the throat out of a superior wolf. Breathing heavily, Nora closed her eyes and forced the heat down, burying it under a decade of trauma and obedience. She grabbed the mop. She had to survive. She just had to make it through tonight's summit. But as she wiped away the water, she couldn't shake the feeling that the cage inside her mind was finally beginning to rust, and the lock was dangerously close to shattering. Headlights cut through the dense Pacific Northwest fog, illuminating the grand wrought-iron gates of the Norton estate. Inside the kitchen, the atmosphere was a whirlwind of culinary panic. Mrs. Beatrice Higgins was shouting orders, her face flushed red as she orchestrated the plating of the roasted venison. Nora stood near the swinging doors, a tray of crystal water goblets balanced perfectly on her fingertips. Despite the frantic energy of the kitchen, she felt eerily calm. The agonizing heat that had plagued her all afternoon had receded into a strange, thrumming hum beneath her skin. It felt like the heavy electric stillness in the air just before a massive thunderstorm. "They're taking their seats," whispered Toby Richards, a terrified 10-year-old Omega boy who had recently been brought into the kitchens after his mother fell ill. He was trembling, holding a basket of warm, artisan bread. "Mrs. Higgins, Alpha Norton is already looking angry. He wants the first course." "Then go, go, go!" Beatrice shooed them forward. "Nora, keep your eyes on the table. Pour the water, step back, and do not speak. Toby, follow her. If you drop a single crumb of that bread, I'll have your hide." Nora pushed open the heavy oak doors, stepping into the extravagant dining room. The long mahogany table was illuminated by a massive crystal chandelier. At the head sat Silas Norton, his broad shoulders practically bursting through his tailored Armani suit, radiating an oppressive, domineering alpha aura designed to intimidate. Beside him sat Genevieve, looking regal and smug in a deep emerald gown. But Nora's attention was immediately drawn to the opposite end of the table. Sitting there was Liam Blackwood, the alpha of the neighboring Silver Pines pack. Unlike Silas, who constantly projected his dominance like a bludgeon, Liam's power was a quiet, suffocating ocean. He was lean, ruggedly handsome, and wore a simple charcoal button-down shirt that starkly contrasted with Silas's corporate attire. His beta, Caleb Foster, sat to his right. As Nora approached the table to pour the water, she felt a strange sensation. The thrumming beneath her skin spiked, vibrating in harmony with the air around Liam. She kept her eyes glued to the tablecloth, moving with practiced, silent grace. When she reached Liam's side, she tilted the crystal pitcher. As the ice-cold water filled his goblet, Liam suddenly paused his conversation with Silas. He turned his head slightly, his sharp, storm-gray eyes locking onto Nora's wrist. He inhaled. A subtle, barely noticeable flaring of his nostrils. Nora froze for a fraction of a second. Most wolves ignored her entirely, their senses sliding right past her muted, scentless presence. But Liam wasn't ignoring her. He was staring at her with a profound, unreadable expression of shock and intense curiosity. "Is there a problem with the water, Alpha Blackwood?" Genevieve asked, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness, though her eyes shot daggers at Nora. "No," Liam replied smoothly, his gaze lingering on Nora for a second longer before returning to Silas. "Just admiring the crystal. Your estate is as grand as the rumors suggest, Silas. Blackridge timber affords us certain luxuries," Silas boasted, leaning back in his chair. "Now, regarding the logging rights near the river border," Nora exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she was holding and quickly backed away, retreating to the shadows near the wall where the servants were expected to stand. She tried to calm her racing heart. Why had Liam looked at her like that? What did he smell? The dinner progressed with agonizing slowness. Politics, veiled threats, and corporate posturing dominated the conversation. Nora watched from the wall, her eyes scanning the room. Toby was approaching Genevieve's side of the table, holding a silver gravy boat. The young boy's hands were shaking violently. The oppressive auras of two powerful alphas in the room were simply too much for his undeveloped omega senses. "Don't look at her, Toby," Nora prayed silently. "Just pour it and leave." Toby stepped up to Genevieve, lifting the heavy silver boat. But as he tipped it, Genevieve suddenly shifted in her chair to laugh at something Silas said. Her elbow clipped Toby's wrist. The silver boat slipped. A splash of hot, dark brown gravy landed directly on the lap of Genevieve's custom emerald gown. The dining room plunged into a horrifying, dead silence. Toby dropped the silver boat onto the carpet with a dull thud. He immediately fell to his knees, clapping his hands over the back of his neck in the ultimate posture of wolf submission, weeping in sheer terror. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Luna. Please, I didn't mean to." Genevieve stood up slowly, staring at the stain on her dress. Her face twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. "You filthy, useless little rat." "Genevieve, calm yourself," Silas muttered, though he looked equally disgusted. He turned to his guards. "Take the boy outside. Lock him in the kennels for the week. No food." "No!" Toby screamed, sobbing into the carpet. "Please, Alpha! I'm sorry!" "Wait!" Genevieve hissed, raising a hand. She stepped around the table, looming over the trembling 10-year-old. "The kennels are too good for him. An Omega needs to learn their place through pain. Hold his hands out." Two burly pack enforcers stepped forward, grabbing Toby by the arms and dragging him up, forcing his small palms flat on the dining table. Genevieve picked up a heavy, serrated steak knife. "A ruined dress costs thousands," Genevieve said coldly. "A ruined hand costs nothing." Liam Blackwood leaned forward, his jaw tight. "Silas, he's a child. This is a bit extreme, even for a border dispute negotiation." "He is my pack's property, Liam," Silas warned, his eyes flashing a dangerous amber. "Do not interfere in my house." Genevieve raised the knife. Toby let out a sound of pure, helpless agony. In the shadows, the rusty lock finally shattered. Nora didn't think. She didn't reason. The decade of suppression, the years of silent abuse, the desperate need to hide it all evaporated in a single, blinding flash of white-hot fury. The beast tore through the cage. "Stop." The word wasn't shouted. It was spoken softly. But the moment the syllable left Nora's lips, it didn't just carry sound. It carried a physical, crushing weight. An explosion of pure, undiluted pheromones blasted outward from Nora's body. It wasn't the sweet, submissive scent of an Omega. It was the scent of lightning striking an ancient pine forest sharp, ozone-heavy, and overwhelmingly dominant. The shockwave hit the room like a bomb. The two burly enforcers holding Toby instantly collapsed, their knees slamming into the floorboards as the sheer pressure of the command forced them into submission. They gasped for air, unable to lift their heads. Genevieve dropped the knife, stumbling backward, her hands flying to her throat as if she were suddenly choking. Even Silas, the proud, arrogant alpha of the Blackridge pack, visibly flinched, his hands gripping the arms of his chair so tightly the wood cracked. Every head in the room snapped toward the shadows. Nora stepped forward into the light of the chandelier. Her faded servant uniform seemed like a cruel joke against the sheer majesty of the power rolling off her. Her previously dull brown eyes were now glowing a brilliant, terrifying, luminescent gold, the absolute mark of a true alpha bloodline. Liam Blackwood slowly stood up from his chair, completely unaffected by the crushing weight in the room, a look of profound awe spreading across his face. "Who? What are you?" Silas choked out, struggling against the heavy air, staring at the servant he had tormented for 10 years. Nora stood between the trembling boy and the alphas, her golden eyes locking onto Silas. The silence was over. Silence reigned absolute in the dining room, thick and suffocating. The opulent crystal chandelier above seemed to dim in the presence of the golden luminescence radiating from Nora's eyes. For 10 years, she had been a ghost, a fixture of the Norton estate, as easily ignored as the expensive wallpaper. Now, she was the only thing anyone could see. Silas Norton was the first to break the paralysis. His amber eyes, usually burning with unyielding arrogance, were blown wide with a mixture of terror and furious denial. He gripped the edge of the mahogany table, forcing himself to stand against the sheer physical weight of Nora's aura. "What trickery is this?" Silas roared, though his voice lacked its usual booming resonance. It sounded thin, strained under the pressure. "You are a defective!" Dr. Gable confirmed it. "You are a useless, barren Omega." "Dr. Gable is a liar on your payroll, Silas," Liam Blackwood interjected. The Silver Pines Alpha stepped away from the table, moving with a fluid, predatory grace that positioned him subtly between Nora and Silas's recovering enforcers. Liam's storm-gray eyes never left Nora, reflecting a profound mixture of reverence and awe. "Look at her eyes. Feel the air in this room. That isn't an Omega's scent, and it certainly isn't a defect. That is true Alpha blood, the Hastings bloodline." Genevieve Sterling scrambled backward, her emerald gown catching on the leg of her overturned chair. She hit the floor with an undignified shriek, clawing at her own throat. "Make her stop! Silas, kill her! She's attacking me!" Nora ignored the pathetic whimpers of the woman who had tormented her for a decade. Her focus remained entirely on Silas. The burning inferno that had tormented her chest for years was no longer a cage. It was a boundless reservoir of energy flowing through her veins. Every instinct, suppressed and buried, was screaming at her to dominate, to protect the innocent, to tear down the false king standing before her. Slowly, Nora lowered her gaze to the terrified young boy at her feet. Toby was curled into a tight ball, trembling violently. But the moment Nora placed a gentle, calloused hand on his shoulder, his shaking ceased. Her power wrapped around him like a protective shield, isolating him from the crushing pressure in the room. "Stand up, Toby," Nora commanded. Her voice was no longer the raspy, timid whisper of a servant. It was melodic, layered with a resonant, subsonic frequency that demanded absolute obedience without a trace of cruelty. Toby looked up, his tear-streaked face bathed in the golden light of her eyes. He scrambled to his feet, hiding behind her faded cotton skirt. Silas bared his teeth, his canines elongating as his wolf fought to surface. "Guards, subdue her. She is a rogue threat to this pack." The two enforcers, still gasping on the floor, hesitated. Their biology was warring against their alpha's command. To attack a true alpha, a mythical tier of werewolf whose lineage traced back to the original forest kings, was to invite biological suicide. But their fear of Silas's wrath eventually won out. They growled, pushing themselves up from the oak floorboards. Before they could take a single step, Caleb Foster, Liam's beta, materialized from the shadows near the door. With two brutally efficient strikes, Caleb sent both enforcers crashing through a glass display cabinet, showering the room in shattered antique porcelain. "Silver Pines will not stand by and watch a true alpha be assaulted, Norton," Liam warned, his own aura finally flaring. It was a cold, rushing winter storm, blending perfectly with Nora's heavy ozone scent. The combination was intoxicating, a harmonious duet of power that made the very foundations of the Norton estate groan. "She belongs to Blackridge," Silas snarled, ripping off his suit jacket, his muscles bulging as dark fur began to sprout along his forearms. "Her father was weak, and she is weak. She is my property." "Arthur Hastings was not weak," Liam countered, his voice dripping with venom. "He was murdered, and I have the proof. My investigators, working with Jonathan Carmichael, a senior forensic accountant at Deloitte, have spent the last 6 months tracking the human money you embezzled through Blackridge Timber Holdings. You siphoned millions to bribe pack elders and hire the rogue mercenaries who ambushed Arthur and Madeline. You stole this territory, Silas." Nora's breath hitched. The words pierced through the roaring inferno in her mind. Murdered. Silas hadn't just enslaved her. He had slaughtered her parents to steal their crown. He had bribed Dr. Gable to keep her drugged, feeding her low doses of liquid wolfsbane in her kitchen meals to suppress her biology and keep her trapped in an omega state. The realization snapped the last tether of her restraint. A guttural, terrifying roar ripped from Nora's throat. The sound shattered the remaining crystal goblets on the table and cracked the windows. Silas lunged forward, his claws fully extended, aiming straight for her heart. He never made it. Nora didn't even shift. She merely raised her hand and released a concentrated wave of dominance. It hit Silas like a freight train. The false alpha was thrown backward, crashing over the heavy mahogany table and slamming into the far wall with a sickening crunch. He collapsed into a heap of broken wood and spilled gravy, gasping for breath, his wolf utterly crushed by the sheer weight of her bloodline. "We are leaving," Nora stated, her golden eyes sweeping over the room. Genevieve was sobbing in the corner. The remaining pack guards were frozen in terror. "Toby comes with me. If anyone follows, I will not show this much mercy again." Liam stepped to her side, his arm hovering protectively behind her back. "We go now, to Silver Pines." Nora nodded once. She didn't look back as she walked out of the grand dining room, leaving 10 years of dust, abuse, and silence behind her. She was a servant no more. Sanctuary materialized as a sprawling, heavily fortified compound nestled deep within the Deschutes National Forest. The Silver Pines territory was a world away from Black Ridge's ostentatious wealth. Here, massive log cabins blended into the ancient timberland, humming with a palpable sense of genuine community and safety. For 3 agonizing days, Nora rested. Breaking a 10-year chemical suppression took a monumental physical toll. Dr. Sarah Jenkins, Liam's pack physician, confirmed the horrifying reality. Nora's system had been deliberately saturated with synthetic wolfsbane, engineered to stunt her biology without killing her. The Equinox Summit and the brutal threat to young Toby had acted as a desperate biological override, burning through the embedded toxins in one fiery burst of pure energy. Liam rarely left her side during the grueling recovery. The Silver Pines Alpha was everything. Silas was not patient, fiercely protective, and deeply respectful. Whenever Liam entered the room, Nora's lingering bone-deep aches miraculously subsided, replaced by a warm, comforting hum that settled in her chest. Late on the 3rd night, Nora stood on Liam's rustic balcony, staring out at the moonlit woods. She wore a soft, oversized wool sweater he had given her, a stark contrast to the scratchy servant uniforms of her traumatic past. "You should be resting," Liam murmured softly, stepping into the doorway with 2 steaming mugs of chamomile tea. "I've rested for 10 long years," Nora replied, turning to face him. "I can't sleep until Silas is finally handled." Liam walked forward and handed her a mug. As their fingers brushed, a powerful jolt of electricity sparked violently between them. Nora gasped softly, meeting his intense storm-gray eyes. The profound connection was an undeniable magnetic pull, the ancient, unbreakable thread of fated mates. "You feel it too," Liam whispered. "I knew it the exact moment you poured that water. My wolf smelled his ultimate other half. But you are entirely free here, Nora. I won't push you after a lifetime of stolen choices." Hot tears of profound relief pricked Nora's eyes. "Silas won't let this go. He knows my mere existence makes his claim to the Blackridge pack entirely illegitimate." Liam's jaw tightened ominously. Caleb's scouts spotted heavy movement. Silas isn't waiting for the Council of Elders. He's mobilizing his elite enforcers to wipe out Silver Pines and bury the truth forever. Nora's grip on her mug tightened until her knuckles turned white. Silas was willing to ignite a bloody pack war and slaughter innocent wolves just to keep his stolen throne. The fiery beast in her chest, resting peacefully for days, snapped awake with a vengeful roar. "He won't shed another drop of innocent blood for me," Nora declared, her eyes igniting with a terrifying gold. "It ends tonight." The disputed border between the 2 packs was a jagged line of towering Douglas firs. The midnight air carried the heavy scent of an incoming thunderstorm. Silas Norton stood arrogantly at the clearing's edge, flanked by 50 heavily armed enforcers. Bruised and deeply humiliated from their previous encounter, his usual pride was replaced by rabid desperation. "Liam Blackwood!" Silas roared blindly into the darkness. "Hand over the Hastings girl immediately, and I'll spare your pathetic pack." Liam did not step forward to answer the challenge. Instead, a lone figure emerged from the deep shadows. Nora walked calmly into the pale moonlight, unarmed. The rising wind whipped her dark hair as her golden eyes burned like twin suns against the pitch-black forest backdrop. "You want me, Silas?" Nora's voice echoed through the canyon, amplified by her awakening power. The rightful, true heir. "Kill her!" Silas screamed frantically, pointing a trembling finger at her. Not a single enforcer dared to move a muscle. Nora's aura exploded outward, a devastating, suffocating hurricane of pure alpha dominance that blanketed the clearing. The Blackridge enforcers collapsed instantly, their primal instincts entirely paralyzed by the overwhelming scent of their ancestral ruler. "You stole my family, poisoned my mind, and corrupted a proud pack," Nora growled, stepping menacingly forward. Realizing his men were useless, Silas let out a furious howl and shifted. His hulking dark brown wolf charged recklessly, jaws snapping viciously, fully intent on tearing her throat out. Nora didn't even flinch. As Silas desperately closed the distance, she leapt upward. The miraculous transformation was instantaneous. Mid-air, the fragile human woman vanished, replaced by a colossal, magnificent wolf. She was impossibly massive, her fur a pristine midnight black that seemingly absorbed the ambient moonlight, her golden eyes glowing with an ethereal fury. The true alpha had finally, truly awakened. Silas collided heavily with her, but it was like a mortal dog striking a solid mountain. Nora didn't budge an inch. With a terrifying snarl, she sank her sharp teeth deep into his scruff, not to kill, but to completely dominate. She forcefully lifted the false alpha off the muddy ground and slammed him violently into the earth. The brutal impact shuddered through the ancient trees. Silas thrashed wildly, but Nora firmly pinned him with one massive paw squarely on his heaving chest. Leaning in, her glowing golden eyes mere inches from his terrified amber ones, she unleashed a deafening roar that violently rattled the teeth of every single wolf within 10 miles. It was the ultimate, undeniable demand for absolute submission. Under the crushing physical weight and divine pressure of her sacred bloodline, Silas's broken spirit snapped completely. His wolf whimpered pitifully, tail tucking firmly, and he bared his vulnerable throat in unconditional, pathetic surrender. A collective, awestruck gasp rippled through the clearing. Every single Blackridge enforcer bowed their heads deeply to the Black Wolf. From the opposite tree line, Liam, Caleb, and the entire Silver Pines pack emerged, immediately dropping to their knees in equal, stunned reverence. Nora slowly released Silas and shifted fluidly back into her human form. Liam was instantly at her side, warmly wrapping a heavy winter coat around her trembling shoulders. She leaned back heavily against his sturdy chest, firmly anchored by his steady heartbeat. "It's finally done," she whispered softly, her brilliant golden eyes slowly fading back to a warm, gentle brown. The false king's reign was officially over. The silent Omega servant had triumphantly reclaimed her stolen crown with the undeniable power of her blood. United under fated mates, the packs would finally see a bright new dawn. Nora had spent 10 agonizing years in the dust, but tonight she undeniably owned the stars. Did Nora's journey from silent servant to powerful true alpha leave you breathless? If you loved this epic tale of hidden power, fated romance, and poetic justice, please hit that like button, share this video with your fellow werewolf drama fans, and subscribe to our channel for more heart-pounding stories. Your amazing support helps us bring these wild adventures to life. Leave a comment down below. See you next time.
Hi, my name is King's Obsession Concord, the owner and manager of King's Obsession Concord. After watching the video, for 10 years she lived as a silent Omega servant. Until the night her true alpha blood awakened, I'd really like to know what you think. How did this story make you feel? What stayed with me most was the sense of resilience throughout the story. Watching a character spend years being overlooked, only to discover a strength that had always been there, creates a feeling of hope and self-discovery. It reminds us that people often carry far more within them than others realize. One gentle lesson I took from this story is that our circumstances don't always define who we are. Growth can happen quietly, and sometimes confidence begins when we finally recognize our own worth. Do you think her transformation changed the way others saw her, or mainly the way she saw herself? And which moment stood out to you the most? In everyday life, maybe the takeaway is to trust your abilities a little more, even when recognition takes time. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoy stories like this, feel free to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching and being part of the journey with us.